How's it going? Oh man, I inhaled that smoke. I'm Tim Jackson here with Berkshire Hathaway.
René Canler with Root Mortgage here in the beautiful Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, we are at Broadway Cigar's speakeasy location. I can't give locations, but I can meet with people here if they so please. So if you're wanting to check out one of the coolest, I'm gonna give a quick. I'll set this back down. I'm gonna record with my phone really quickly, and I'm just gonna give a quick spin around of this amazing speakeasy. We're in downtown. You can hear the train passing
Got the
by.
sound of the train. Oh my goodness, I am a city boy raised in the beautiful city of Chicago. And I'll never forget the summers, the winters when I would go to Puerto Rico. And you would hear all those lovely sounds, the beautiful birds, the insects, the coquis at night. And I just couldn't fall asleep because I wasn't used to those night sounds. The train, the sirens, the buses, those are the sounds that would put me to sleep. It's amazing the difference.
Yeah, and the speakeasy being so close to we're pretty close to the inner city and the industrial area. It feels kind of like we're like in a Peaky Blinders room, or I don't know. I felt like James Bond coming in here.
Me too. A very undisclosed spot. No one would notice. You have to know the building in order to know where you're at. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, you would not guess.
I know. And then you walk in, and you got this really cool element. A little bar that's over there in the corner. You have the nice furniture. What a great spot to smoke a cigar and to be in good company with such a good person.
Right. Well, for those of you who've been following me on my social media or Michaela's, you might have noticed we put our house up for rent because we're currently pending, and we just got through the negotiations of our new home. And so this is an exciting step forward for us, but there's kind of two things that I think a lot of people have been like, wow, you're keeping your house in Multnomah County as a rental. It's created a lot of questions. And I'll say two things to that personally as somebody that's lived in on 71st between Duke and Flavel for the last 5 years, is that I still believe in Portland. I think selling my house would have been a sign that Portland was just no longer a place I felt was worth investing in. And I think that Portland, downtown specifically, we're in downtown Portland right now. It gets a lot of negative press or bad PR, but I think a lot of that is overdone, and it's almost in a way that they say when a stock is over criticized by the analysts and stuff, they say that's a great time to buy if you believe in the fundamentals beneath the stock. Mm-hmm. And so I think Portland right now does have a lot of things going that bring it to the national news outlets. But I think there's things happening behind the curtain, such as we were talking right over René Gonzalez taking over as city commissioner. I mean, we both believe he's got a good backbone, and who represents you in the city can have a huge effect in the next 5 to 10 years. So I believe that Portland is, and just how much interest we got in the rental. There were so many people that wanted a charming,
without a doubt,
little bungalow in Portland.
I got so much love for Brentwood Darlington, which is the neighborhood that you're in, and I have a lot of love for that neighborhood for a lot of reasons, mainly because of the people, the families, the community that I've met throughout my years in Portland in a very different capacity. And I gotta say, Tim, what an honor it was for you to give me a call and say, hey, I'm ready to buy. Can you represent me on the lending side? But what I really need from you, René, is for you to be objective, because this is such an emotional process. And what a cool reality check, right?
Right.
So that everyone can hear, this is an emotional process. Buying your home is intentionally emotional because you're putting yourself under these weird situation where you're ready to give up a nice chunk of your money to lend or to borrow even a bigger chunk of money. And you have to get into a negotiating process with the seller. And then once a contract's accepted, go. We have 30 days to do it. What an emotional roller coaster.
It is. And this is the first time I bought a house as a licensed agent. And I realized in self-reflection how good it is to not to have just a self-reflection on my own job. Is it's really good to have somebody there, even if it's a sounding board. I almost was like, I should hire a real estate agent, because between my wife and I, we're the ones making the personal decision. Having an objective person there, which is also why I tapped you. I had my principal broker. There's a lot of people that I could name as I made a lot of calls and said, hey, this is the process we're going in, and I just want another set of eyes on what I'm doing, because I'm making the personal decision of the purchase, but I'm also making the financial real estate. I'm being my own realtor. And it just gave me a cool, fresh perspective of what is my job when I'm representing somebody else.
Yeah.
And I literally had, my job is to put myself in other people's shoes. So putting myself in those shoes was a cool experience of being like, okay, this is how we tackle higher interest rates. This is how we get over the inspection period. And I've got to say that even using the techniques I've used for my own clients in negotiating for this house has been very fruitful and very enjoyable, and I will say a little bit also emotional, and there was a little bit of a roller coaster in it.
And there's nothing wrong with saying that, but there is wisdom there. You know yourself, you know your family, you know your needs, you know your wants, and so you also know that you need support in the process. Well, I can say that I value you more as a realtor, working with you as a client. I've worked with you in the realtor side, for the last year and a half. We've talked business, and we've had that working relationship, as well as developing our friendship. And now to have you as a client, I can see how good you are as a realtor. You ask the right questions, and you ask them again because you want to get yourself familiar with the situation. You want to get yourself familiar with your options. You want to know what's the best way to go about it, because even though you may have several options, they may not all be the best. And so what you want to do is prioritize. And that's what anyone is looking for when you're working with a real estate professional team, right? You want the realtor to be able to represent you, to negotiate on your behalf, but first and foremost, to listen to you and to know exactly what it is that you're looking to do.
Yeah.
So that's been an honor to work with you in that capacity.
And I think with July 4th just passing, I think a lot of people have been reflecting on the privileges we have. And one of the privileges I feel super happy to have is just any home loan. Specifically, I'm using the VA home loan, but just the privileges of being able to leverage generous terms. Like, we're leveraging a bank's money in a way that is sustainable. And so it's just been really cool to have you as a guide in this process of using that capital to leverage future wealth growth for my family, so I can pass down a legacy. Maybe this current home I have could end up going to one of my kids in the future, or could be our final retirement. It'd be really cool to go. I was thinking if we came full circle and landed back at that house when we were retired, because it's got the front porch with the 2 rocking chairs, and it's got a master bedroom on the main, and that's kind of the 2 things that I know a lot of people that are retiring look for. And it's got the 2 bedrooms upstairs for, even when we have grandkids. So I'm not just thinking about holding this for what's it going to get me in the next couple of years. Because I think a lot of people do when I consult them on a listing appointment. I always bring up the potential of rental. And a lot of times they're like, well, I really need the cash. And sometimes that's valid. You need the cash for a higher down payment. You want to make the next mortgage payment more palatable or feasible, but sometimes it's always good to consider all the angles. Like, don't leave any stone unturned. And I highly considered all of the options myself. I had to look at, and having you as a sounding board of like, what is the best strategy for me and my family? We're 30 years old. I'm already in the real estate sector. Should I double expose myself to real estate? And I came to a conclusion that holding a house that I bought is the best conclusion. And honestly, it does fall in line with my own personal philosophy that unless I'm exchanging it for another vehicle that I don't touch what's there, I just allow it to grow. And I think that's when you see the most in the short term, maybe not, but in the long term, we're talking 20, 30 years from now, I know of people that are 60 or 70 years old and they've got 3 or 4 rental properties because they just always just slowly acquired it. Wasn't
Well, if you can hold on to the property, you should. And we
Yeah.
should get a little bit into the financial side, but before we do, this is a really good cigar. We're smoking an Undercrown Sungrown Robusto.
yeah.
What do you think about it?
It's good, yeah. I've got a box of them if anybody wants to give it a go, even here. It's Sungrowns are kind of, to me, like the slept on cigar category. People will go for the Maduros, they'll go for the Cubans.
Connecticut's.
And the Connecticut's are pretty popular for the people that want a lighter cigar. But the Sungrowns are kind of just that step above a Connecticut, where they're not super strong, but they pack a lot of flavor. And yeah, I've just always enjoyed, some of my favorite cigars are in the Sungrown category.
We're pairing it with Knob Creek, and what I did was I followed a video that I saw on Arnold Schwarzenegger when he explained how he first smoked a cigar with this one gentleman whose name I don't remember. And that's what we did today. So what we did was we poured our Knob Creek. I took the cedar lining that's found in the box, and I just brushed the outside of the cigar with the Knob Creek. We lit our cigar, and then after we took that first good breath, we dunked the backside of the cigar into the Knob Creek, and that gave a very sweet taste in the back. It actually moistened the cigar in a good way, and it kind of opened up the draw, which is not what I was expecting.
Sure. No, great cigar and great pairing. Let's get into the financials really quickly of how do you, because I didn't pull any, well, I mean, I don't know, you don't call it a magic trick, but I feel like it was, I think what we discovered in this process of financials, and it goes for anybody, that's not special rules for me, is that, would you say that most of the time, selling versus renting the home, as long as you get a good market rate for the renter, you get that lease in place, and you get the security deposit paid before closing, you're eliminating that debt to income concern that most people have, where they're like, I don't think I can own, the big question is, I don't think I can own 2 homes.
There were several things to consider with your scenario, and one of the things that we considered, and we saw the various loan programs, right? Because some of the questions were, we know that in our market the rates are a little bit higher than what we got used to seeing. So does a conventional loan work better in our situation than the VA loan? We looked at that. How about ARMs? Are they reasonable? Are they going to be a financial advantage? Should we look at ARMs? We looked at ARMs. We looked at VAs. In fact, when we realized that the VA was the product that was going to give you your biggest bang for your buck, then we started to look at, should we put money down? And we thought, oh my goodness, well, consider this. VA is one of 2 loans in this country that truly offers a 0% down, the other being USDA. Now, there's plenty of options if you go to a credit union, if you go to a bank, where they'll offer or they'll give you a second loan for down payment.
Down payment
And
assistance.
so those are known as DPAs, or down payment assistant loans.
And
And
the
that-
county does them too.
yeah. So those programs do exist, and some of them are very expensive. However, they give you that down payment. Well, VA and USDA are the only 2 loan programs that do this without giving you a second loan or asking or charging you so much money. The VA loan does ask for a funding fee, and the funding fee at 0% down is 3.3% of the loan size. But if you put 5% down, that 3.3 gets cut to 1.5. That's a big savings, and we saw how much of a savings that was.
Yeah.
Because it made more sense to get that 5% down payment. It was going to cost less
Yeah.
than the actual funding fee.
Yeah. And for any of my veterans out there, it's important to know that I am using my second half of my VA benefits. So you have your max amount that you can loan on from the VA,
Yeah.
and your certificate of eligibility doesn't get wrapped into one property. You can continue that, and as long as you're staying within that eligibility amount, I've got the loan on my current home as VA. I'm keeping it VA. I'm not refinancing it, which is good because I refied it to a good interest rate.
You have a low interest rate. You didn't want to refi. You shouldn't need to. And
Right.
in this case, you didn't, because what Tim's talking about is your entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's based on a formula. So what we do on our end of it, on the mortgage side, is we work to see how much of that entitlement is tied up in that first home.
Right.
Which then we determine how much could you purchase, what's the loan size that you can have, and still do 0%. And we found that number for you. So then the other question was, if that's the amount, then how much of a down payment am I going to need if I buy a house at this range?
Right.
That was the second step. And then the third step was, well, if you're going to put this much down, let's work to get into 5% because then you're saving a good amount of money on the funding fee.
And for those who are maybe thinking of selling, or you're in a house that you know isn't, you're in the house and you know that you're watching interest rates just like anybody, and you're saying, all right, can I afford the next home? You can keep that current loan on the home, rent it out, and then that second loan you get, what happens to that? Because obviously when you're calculating, you're looking at a debt to income, right? And so that mortgage is usually counted against the borrower. But what happens to that mortgage as a debt to income if they have a lease in place?
Great question. Remember, our industry looks at several things. One is the credit score that determines pricing, and it also determines loan program. But what the credit score also gives us is a credit report, and that's what Tim's mentioning when he talks about DTI. The D is debt to I income, right? DTI, debt to income. So the credit report gives us the debts that are in your name. In this case, there was a mortgage that was a debt in your name. And that number, that ratio that's created when that debt, those monthly debts are divided by that monthly income, is what determines the range or how much money can you truly borrow. And so what we had to determine was, do you want to sell or do you want to rent? We already know that you're on the rent side. And so then what we need to figure out is, well, considering your mortgage, how much can you rent your home for? And then we look at that number to see how much of that debt we can offset. And in your case, we can rent that home because in Portland, the rental market is still hot. We can rent that home for more than what you're paying in your mortgage. And in that case, it makes complete sense to stay with your home, keep it, and rent it instead of selling it.
Right.
The other side of it now, and this is for others who are thinking, well, I don't have the down payment. In that case, that's where we have to start to strategize. Does it make more sense to sell the house? Some situations, it might make sense to sell the house. In other situations, it might not. And the other reality is, if you want to be a landlord, that's going to take effort, time, energy. That's a risk. Is it worth the risk? And in this case, it was another yes. Not only can I get more in renting this house and the mortgage that I currently have to pay, but I think it's worth the risk. I don't need the cash that's found in the equity of this home. I just need to offset the debt.
Right.
And you can do that, and you did with renting the house.
Yeah. And the equity's still there should I ever need to tap into it, either through a HELOC or I could potentially sell the house later down the road if I wanted to.
And you can refinance it. I mean, right now you are at an interest rate where at this moment you don't want to refinance. But I have met many people who've had rates maybe a little higher than yours, but in their situation they wanted to refinance and it made complete sense for them. Yeah. And so that's the other thing, right? You want to work with someone you trust, someone on the financing side that can give you these options, that can calculate and determine those break-even points. Is it worth it? What are you trying to do right now in this moment?
Yeah.
And that's how you make your decision.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we learned in this process, or I felt like I maybe already had like an idea of, but it becoming personal gave me a lot better grounding. So it's that your VA loan can be used more than once. You don't have to refinance on a home if you're going to keep it as a rental. And just that leveraging that money will, in the long run, I think boost the equity and the wealth growth as a young growing family. It's going to give us that ability in the next coming decades to really see, it'll just keep our options really like nice and open. Like I talk about, I can keep the house as a rental, I can sell it later down the road.
Well, I think the wisdom to it is also the vulnerability, because a lot of times we are not vulnerable enough to ask those questions.
Yeah.
And then to actually state, this is going to be emotional for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do this without an objective lens. Can you be my objective lens? And that's typically what the realtor is for the client.
Yeah. And I definitely say that I'm taking a bigger risk. I'm taking a risk against a lot of things. I'm holding 2 mortgages. I'm doing things that maybe some people feel less, is it risk averse? Yeah.
Sure.
I think risk averse is a good word. So I think it's also just like to analyze where are you at in your financial plan? Are you getting into retirement? Are you wanting a more safe investment route? To me, the Portland rental market, I would say, is I don't want to say a high risk, high return, but because I think of it in like terms of stocks, but I do kind of tend to think of my Portland rental as a little bit more of a higher risk, higher return.
You have to be real with yourself. You have to know the county laws
Mhm.
that exist, and you have to be a person that's okay with adapting along the way.
Yeah.
For those of you that know my story, you know that I was in education for 18 years. I was a school principal for 10 of those 18 years. 13 of those years I was in administration, either as an assistant principal or as a principal. But I love real estate. And I loved real estate from a very young age. And it was my real estate investments, as risky as they were. I had 3 doors in Chicago when I moved to Portland.
Yeah.
And I had the faith, the trust of a rental company, a good friend of mine, to take care of those 3 doors until it was the right time for me to sell. In fact,
Yeah.
I wanted to sell one of them, but it didn't make sense because I wasn't getting the numbers that I wanted. So of
Yeah.
course that is risk.
Yeah.
But because of those real estate investments, I was able to save up enough to get out of a career that was killing me.
Yeah.
So of course I believe in what you're doing, Tim. And not everyone can do that. Not everyone can take their home, the home that they've turned into a home for 5 years, and give it up to someone else, because that's not as easy as it is to say.
Yeah. You've got to disassociate it a little bit as less of a, it's still going to be our first home, and I was going to have to give it up in one way or another. I was going to have to sell it to somebody else. I was going to have to rent it to somebody else. There is kind of it's almost like the child leaving the home, like you're giving something up that you've been in, you've worked on the house, you've done things that were your own vision. And I mean, some of you have been in my backyard for backyard movie nights. You've seen that shed that I built by hand right as COVID hit. I've got that backyard shed. So a lot of it is giving up these big projects and a lot of stuff that I've poured a lot of energy into, but I'm happy to allow somebody else, whether it's a buyer or a renter, to experience that vision I had for the home and carry it on, either as a temporary living place while they're 1-year lease, they get to experience, and maybe I'll turn it in the future. There's just so many options available. I could turn it into another one is a fully furnished traveling nurse rental. I could do that in the future. Airbnb is kind of off the table because of Portland laws, but and obviously, like I've mentioned, the house, if I ever decide to sell it, I think just from the attention that renters and people that wanted to rent the home, I think that same attention would be given by somebody who wanted to buy the home. So I guess all of that to say that, like, if you're in this position where you're getting ready to buy your first home and it's going to be a stepping stone house, I would personally be thinking of it as in 5 years, because right now the 1% rule, which is can you make 1% of your mortgage, can you make 1% of the total purchase price, the rental amount? So it's kind of an investment tool that you use to calculate your return. And it's a very hard number to hit in this market. But if you think from a 5-year perspective, when you look at the tools of refinancing, you look at equity growth, and you look at paying off a principal, I think that 1% rule comes into view when you're looking at it from a longer term. So you're not going to get this instant gratification of just most of the time. I say most of the time because there are exceptions, like that $175,000 house on the street that sold, where people can walk into equity and it happens. But real estate's kind of a slower game. You don't normally, and you can step into some equity, but you don't normally step into just this screaming deal that's just 1 in a million years. It's a 1 in a million year event. But just to say that if you're right now purchasing and you're looking at it from a 5-year perspective, you could potentially, let's just say, purchase a $400,000 or $500,000 home right now, and in 5 years, let's just say you refinance, you could get this home to a point where it's now an investment that makes a lot of sense.
All the time, all the time. And if you're considering an investment such as what Tim is explaining, that is, you're leaving your current home to buy another one and you're renting this one, or even if you're buying an investment property, the goal isn't to make money off the mortgage. Your goal is not to make $1,000 every month. Your
Right.
goal is to get the mortgage paid.
Yes.
And of course, what you would love to do is to make a little bit more so that you can pay the other costs to being a landlord. Maybe $300 to $500 more a month. That's the goal.
As a
The
cushion.
real purpose for doing what you're doing is the equity that's going to grow.
Mhm.
And I have a friend and client who bought a house 4 blocks off the beach in 2021 for just under $500,000. That's now valued at $700,000.
Nice.
That's 2 years ago.
It's money they're making while they're sleeping.
His idea was to have a vacation rental, to do an Airbnb type of deal, and he makes enough to not just pay the mortgage, but to also pay the costs of the managing company and the other things to do the fixes around the house.
Yeah.
$200,000 in equity in 2 years. Now, that might be the exception, right?
Yeah.
That's probably not the norm.
Yeah.
However, the value of a home will continue to increase, even in this market.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, everything is a calculated risk versus reward, I think is how you look at it. And so, you know, I'll just be frank, like my own personal emotions as I'm purchasing this next house is, could the home be worth less in a year? I mean, maybe. I don't have a crystal ball. Will that affect me tremendously if the house is now worth, let's just say 5% less than I paid for it? No, because I don't plan on making any sudden moves. I plan on being here in Oregon for the next 30 years is my plan, at least. And so when you have that long-term perspective, it takes away and this is why it also comes down to your personal risk and what are you looking to do? Because it's just like buying, it's the same, I always have to go back to stock buying, because you don't buy it into a stock hoping to sell it the next day. Like, you don't day trade you definitely don't do it with homes, and even with stocks, it's not, people will say that's how you burn through cash. With real estate, it is this slow and steady acquire, sit on it. Maybe at some point I'll be underwater and I'll just work through it. Does it faze me? I mean, would it be tough? It might get a little bit tough, but I've only noticed that the harder I work towards hitting these goals, it's just made it easier as time goes on, as you just kind of get out of that. You make a tight squeeze when I purchased my first house, and then you get that breathing room as things progress.
Well, when you walk, especially as men of faith, when you walk hand in hand with God, and you try to listen, not just to the voices, but also to your surroundings, and you meditate on that,
Yeah.
then you realize that even though situations are hard, it's worth moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And for those of you that are listening and wondering, okay, what are my options? How do I even begin? First, please call me. I'd love to support you. But really what you need is an application for a loan, apply, and then the documents are really simple. The initial documents that are needed to help identify how much you can qualify for, your ID, the last 30 days of pay stubs, your W-2s in the last 2 years, and then your bank statements.
Yeah.
Because those last 2 months of bank statements will show the underwriters where the money's coming from to put the down payment.
Yeah. And once you get that pre-approval, or even before, I personally like to do 30-minute to 1 hour sit-downs over coffee, or heck, even a cigar if that's your jam. And we could even do it at this cool speakeasy. And Renee's, obviously, if you want a lender in on the conversation, that's totally, we could have a 3-person conversation, a 4-person conversation if there's more than one person involved in this decision. But just going over like all these options for your own personal appetite for, like we talked about, risk, reward, and really your goals. Like, you might have a 5-year goal if you know you're not going to be in Oregon for long, but maybe how could you purchase a home and turn it into a rental, or purchase it. I've got some people that say, Tim, can I purchase a home and sell it in 5 years? That's, those are conversations that if that's your goal, then let's have that conversation. But It's just always based on the personal appetite of what is the person looking for, and so having that conversation with us will allow us to help shape the vision a little bit better, and to put some numbers to it, and to put some real life scenarios on the table.
Well, you've seen a river. You've followed a river, right? And the river, the waters come usually from the top and then go all the way back down. And you can look at this beautiful river, and to me, that's a great analogy of what planning is. You should have a plan. If it is a 5-year plan, if it's a 10-year plan, but life works very similar to a river. It does not go straight down.
Yeah.
It will take turns, and it will take turns and points where you would think, why is the river crevicing in that direction? It doesn't make any sense. That's life, and what's more important, besides having a plan, being surrounded by people who love you, finding the right professional to support you, it's also to be adaptive. You must be adaptive in this world, because you can have the most beautiful plan in place. It's not going to turn out the way you thought.
Right. So if you're thinking about making the move, even if it's a year from now and you just want to start the conversation, you can give me a call at 503-957-7981.
René Canler, 971-350-8969.
Awesome. You guys have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and we're here for you.